When a nation that sits at the intersection of 3 continents controls a critical global waterway, operates the most extensive proxy military network in the Middle East, and is actively enriching uranium to near weapons-grade levels. When that nation's leadership publicly declares that a target has been set, the world cannot afford to look away. In recent weeks, statements emerging from Tehran have escalated beyond the standard register of political rhetoric. Iran's leadership has issued what analysts are calling its most direct and operationally specific warning in years. The language being used is not the ambiguous posturing that the Islamic Republic typically deploys for domestic audiences. It is precise, it is directed, and it is being taken seriously by intelligence services from Washington to Tel Aviv to Brussels. The phrase "the target is set" did not emerge in isolation. It came attached to a broader strategic declaration, one that signals a fundamental shift in how Iran's new leadership calculates risk, projects power, and positions itself in what is becoming an increasingly fragile global security environment. And the question that every serious analyst is now asking is this: are we witnessing a genuine escalation toward a wider conflict? Or is this the opening move in a high-stakes negotiation that Iran believes it cannot win through diplomacy alone? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are covering a story that demands serious, careful, and fully contextualized analysis: the escalating war of words and strategic posturing coming out of Iran under its new political leadership, and what it means for regional and global stability. Let's establish the foundation first, because context here is everything. Iran does not make strategic statements casually. Every major public declaration from the Islamic Republic's senior leadership, particularly those touching on military posture, nuclear capability, or threats toward adversaries, is calculated. It is reviewed. It passes through layers of institutional approval before it reaches the public sphere. When Iranian leadership says something that sounds extreme, the question is never whether they meant it. The question is always what they intended it to accomplish. Since the death of President Ibrahim Raisi in May 2024, and the election of Masoud Pezeshkian as president in the subsequent snap election, Iran has been navigating an extraordinarily complex set of pressures, internally around secession and factional control, and externally around its nuclear program, its regional proxy network, and its increasingly strained relationships with Western powers. Into that environment, the latest statements from Tehran have landed like a match near dry timber. And to understand what is really happening, you need to understand the 5 critical dimensions of this escalation: the military dimension, the nuclear dimension, the proxy warfare dimension, the economic dimension, and the diplomatic dimension. All 5 are moving simultaneously, and all 5 are connected. The statement itself, what was actually said, and why it matters, the phrase "the target is set," and the surrounding statements that have generated so much alarm did not emerge from a single speech or a single official. They represent a pattern, a coordinated series of declarations from multiple levels of Iran's leadership structure that, taken together, paint a picture of a government that believes it is entering a decisive strategic moment. Senior IRGC commanders have made explicit references to identified targets within both Israel and American military infrastructure in the region. The language used has moved away from conditional threats. If attacked, we will respond, toward declarative framing. Targets have been identified, capabilities are in position, and decisions are being made at the highest levels of the Islamic Republic's command structure. Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's public statements in recent months have taken on an increasingly eschatological tone, invoking the language of historic confrontation and civilizational struggle in ways that go beyond political messaging for domestic consumption. When a supreme leader who controls Iran's military, intelligence, and nuclear apparatus begins speaking in terms of historic inevitability, the analytical community pays very close attention. The IRGC's Quds Force, which manages Iran's relationships with proxy forces across the region, has simultaneously signaled to its network Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, Houthi forces in Yemen, and Shia militia networks in Iraq and Syria that a new operational phase may be approaching. The coordination of these signals across multiple theaters is not coincidental. It reflects a centrally managed escalation strategy. The military dimension, what Iran can actually do to assess whether Iran's warnings represent a genuine military threat or strategic theater. When we talk about Iran's strategy in 2025, there's one topic that changes everything, one factor that overshadows every other calculation, and that is the nuclear question. To really understand what's happening, we have to face this head. As of right now, Iran's uranium enrichment program has reached levels that simply don't have a believable civilian purpose. The International Atomic Energy Agency, the world's nuclear watchdog, has confirmed that Iran is enriching uranium to 60% purity. That's just a short technical step away from the 90% needed for a weapon. And they have enough of this material to create a serious breakout risk. To make matters worse, the IAEA's ability to even see what's happening has been crippled. Since 2022, Iran has been removing surveillance cameras and restricting access for inspectors. It's like they're intentionally drawing the blinds on their nuclear activities. Now, The consensus among Western intelligence agencies, from the US Director of National Intelligence to her counterparts in Europe, is that Iran hasn't yet made the final political decision to actually build a bomb. But here's the crucial part: they've done everything else. They have all the pieces in place, all the technical know-how ready to go. If the order is given, they could assemble a nuclear weapon on very short notice. In policy circles, this is called nuclear latency. It's the state of having all the prerequisites for a weapon without actually having one assembled. And right now, Iran is the most advanced nuclear latent state on the planet. In the middle of all the current tension and conflict, that latency itself becomes a powerful deterrent. Think about it. Any country considering a military strike on Iran has to face a terrifying calculation. A strike might push Iran to finally build the bomb. Or worse, the strike might fail to destroy their capability completely, leaving Iran damaged, angry, and now armed with a nuclear weapon. That is the absolute worst-case scenario. So when you hear Iranian leaders making threats, talking about targets being set and decisive confrontations, the silent, unspoken backdrop to every single word is the nuclear program. They don't even need to say it out loud. Every government in the world knows it's there, looming over every decision. Now let's talk about what the target is set really means, in practice. Because Iran's first move in an escalation probably isn't going to be a direct missile launch from its own territory. It's far more likely to be the activation of its most powerful strategic asset, its proxy network. This isn't about one big attack. It's about a coordinated multi-front pressure campaign designed to inflict pain across several different places at once. Iranian strategists call this the axis of resistance. It's a vast network of allied forces that stretches from Tehran all the way through Baghdad, Damascus, Beirut, and down to Sana'a in Yemen. This network gives Iran the ability to apply simultaneous military pressure on Israel, on American bases in the region, on the infrastructure of Gulf Arab states, and even on global shipping routes. The logic behind this strategy is both elegant and incredibly dangerous. By spreading the conflict across so many different groups and locations, Iran makes it extremely difficult for its enemies to respond effectively. If the US launches a major military strike against Iran itself, it risks a much wider, catastrophic war. But if it only hits the proxy forces with limited strikes, it's just chipping away at assets that Iran has spent decades building and can easily rebuild. Meanwhile, this coordinated multi-front campaign can cause massive economic and security damage, far out of proportion to the military force Iran is directly using. The fact that Iran's leadership is now openly talking about identified targets and operational readiness suggests something important. It suggests that the decision-making within this axis of resistance network is getting closer to a hair-trigger moment, closer to a full-scale activation. Whether that trigger actually gets pulled depends on a lot of things. What happens next in Gaza? The future of any nuclear negotiations, Iran's own internal politics, and of course, the attitude of the next American administration towards the Middle East. So why is Iran willing to push things this far? To understand the high-stakes gamble Iran is taking, you have to look at its economic and diplomatic situation. A country with everything to lose acts very differently from a country that feels it's already backed into a corner, already paying the highest possible price. For years, Iran's economy has been crushed under the weight of severe international sanctions. Its currency, the rial, has lost a huge amount of its value. Runaway inflation has wiped out the savings and purchasing power of ordinary Iranian citizens. On top of that, the government's legitimacy has been rocked by wave after wave of mass protests. From the Green Movement years ago to the massive demonstrations after the death of Mahsa Amini in 2022, this unrest is constantly fueled by economic misery and political repression. In this environment, Iran's leadership seems to have reached a conclusion. They can't fix their economy by playing nice and cooperating diplomatically. The big nuclear deal, the JCPOA, fell apart back in 2018 when the United States pulled out. Every attempt to revive it has failed. The economic relief that Iran was promised never really arrived in a meaningful way. At the very same time, Iran has been building stronger ties with Russia and China. Both of these global powers see Iran as a useful counterweight to American influence in the Middle East. We've seen Iranian-Russian military cooperation deepen dramatically during the war in Ukraine, with Iran supplying drones that Russia has used extensively. China remains Iran's biggest trading partner, providing an economic lifeline that helps soften the blow of Western sanctions. So, put yourself in Tehran's shoes for a moment. You have crippling economic pain that diplomacy can't seem to fix. You have powerful new partnerships with major world powers who also oppose American dominance. And you have a military posture that has proven it can inflict real pain on your adversaries without getting hit back with a decisive all-out war. This combination creates the perfect storm for the kind of aggressive escalatory stance we are seeing right now. When Iran says the target is set, it's not a cry of desperation. It's a calculated statement. It comes from a belief that the current global situation, with America's attention split between Ukraine, East Asia, and its own domestic politics, represents a unique window of opportunity, an opportunity that might not last forever. So what does a World War III scenario actually look like from here? It's critical to be precise with our language, because when the stakes are this high, precision is everything. A direct, declared war between major world powers, like in the 20th century, is not the most likely immediate outcome. What is far more likely, and what we seem to be heading towards, is an escalating series of military clashes across multiple regions. Over time, more and more countries get dragged in. The global systems of trade and energy start to break down, and this chaos creates a fertile ground for a catastrophic miscalculation, something that could spiral into a conflict far bigger than anyone ever intended. Look at the Strait of Hormuz. About 20% of the world's entire oil supply passes through that narrow waterway every day. It's Iran's most powerful economic weapon. A decision by Iran to lay mines or blockade the strait would be an act of war, not just against its regional enemies, but against the entire global economy. Oil prices would skyrocket to levels we haven't seen since the oil crises of the 1970s. The inflationary impact on Western economies, which are already struggling, would be devastating. Then, imagine a full-scale activation of Hezbollah in Lebanon, combined with continued Houthi attacks on shipping in the Red Sea, and constant militia strikes on U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria. This would stretch American military resources to the breaking point, forcing impossible choices about where to focus and where to pull back. These decisions would fundamentally reshape the security of the entire region for decades to come. None of this is inevitable. I want to be very clear about that. None of this is a certainty, but all of it is possible. The gap between what is possible and what will actually happen is being decided right now, in real time, in the capitals of Tehran, Jerusalem, Washington, and Moscow. These are decisions being made under immense pressure, with incomplete information, and with the fate of the world hanging in the balance. Thanks for watching. If you found this analysis valuable, please consider subscribing for more deep dives into global affairs. Iran's recent warnings are not just talk. We have to take them seriously, and I'm going to explain exactly why. This isn't about fear-mongering, it's about understanding the reality of a very delicate situation. For a long time there were certain military lines that everyone assumed Iran would never cross. Well, that changed in April 2024 with their direct strike on Israel. That single act rewrote the rulebook and showed us a new willingness to take unprecedented military action. This shift isn't happening in a vacuum. The leadership in Tehran believes they are at a critical turning point, a decisive moment in their history. And for the first time ever, they have what's called nuclear latency. This means they have the capability, the technology, and the materials to develop a nuclear weapon on a relatively short timescale if they decide to. This fact alone completely changes the strategic math of any potential conflict. It's a powerful card they hold, and it influences every move they make and every threat they issue. So when we hear Iranian officials say the target is set, it's a phrase loaded with meaning. It doesn't necessarily mean war is inevitable tomorrow. What it signals is a fundamental shift in their strategic thinking. They've moved from a defensive posture, focused on protecting themselves and their interests, to a more offensive one. They seem to believe that the risks of taking direct action are now lower than the costs of continuing to play a waiting game or trying to accommodate their adversaries. This is a dangerous and volatile change in perspective. Now, what happens next is not predetermined. There are still decisions being made in capitals around the world, in Tehran, in Washington, in Brussels, and across the Middle East. The window for diplomacy is still open, but it's getting smaller every day. Think of it like a ladder of military escalation. Both sides have already climbed several rungs, but they haven't reached the top yet. There are still off-ramps, but they require careful navigation and a genuine will to de-escalate. This is where the global community comes in. The United States, the European Union, and the Gulf states are all key players. This is a moment that demands absolute strategic clarity. Reactive, improvised responses won't cut it. We've seen moments like this before in history, where the choices made by a handful of leaders in a few critical weeks end up shaping the world for the next decade. These moments always reward those who are prepared, who have done the hard work of clear-eyed analysis, and who have the courage to face uncomfortable truths head-on, instead of just hoping they'll go away. This is one of those moments. The more of us who understand what's really going on, beyond the sensational headlines and the simplistic sound bites, the better. When the public is informed, we can demand the kind of thoughtful, responsible leadership that these complex circumstances require. It's easy to get lost in the noise, but the details are what matter. Understanding the context behind Iran's actions, their capabilities, and their motivations is crucial for anyone trying to make sense of the world right now. If this video has provided you with genuine value, if it's helped you connect the dots on a subject you didn't fully grasp before, then you're in the right place. This channel isn't about chasing headlines or stoking panic. We're about analysis. We're about providing context. We do the kind of deep, honest breakdown that empowers you to understand our complicated world. So, if that's what you're looking for, hit that subscribe button right now. Make sure to turn on notifications so you don't miss our next analysis. And please, share this video with someone you know who needs to understand the reality of what's happening in the Middle East. This community is built by people like you, people who believe that understanding the world is not just important, but worth the effort. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.